Well, hi everyone out there in Zoom land. You have tuned in to Clear Capital's webinar called "Where Will Your AVM Perform in an Uncertain Market?" I'm Larry Robinson, our Chief Technology Officer, and also with me today is James Marshall, who is our Director of Data and Analytic Products. If you're not familiar with Clear Capital, you can certainly go to our website and read all of our fun stats, but we're a company that's about 20 years old. We're headquartered out of Reno, Nevada. We have offices in California and Minnesota. We serve 47 of the top 50 lenders in the nation. We've been in business almost 20 years. We do north of 750,000 valuation transactions a month, and we have almost 3 billion property records in our databases. So we've got a pretty good line of sight on what's going on in the real estate valuation industry. Another fun fact is the company is about 600 employees. And so, in America, you probably describe that as a small to medium-sized business. But one of the things that we're really proud about at Clear Capital is, we're a company that just punches way above our weight class. We're super proud of our relationships with Fannie and Freddie and how our technology and data powers a lot of what they do. And we obviously make that our technology and data available to companies of all sizes. And one of the data and analytic products that we're most proud of is our ClearAVM. So a little bit of background on me. Again, I'm our Chief Technology Officer. I have been with Clear Capital 5 years. I joined in early 2016. And prior to that, I spent a fair amount of time working with VCs on the peninsula. And then prior to that, building and selling a couple technology companies. So I've been doing technology for a long time. A fun fact about me is I don't look very good in hats, and yet I'm wearing one anyways, this cool Clear Capital branded hat. And the reason is after 34 years of marriage, I decided to let my wife try and cut my hair during COVID, and it just didn't turn out real well. I kind of jokingly tell people I look like Adolf Hitler starring in Brother, Where Art Thou? So I'm going to keep this cap on, and I'm keeping my marriage intact, so everything's worked out pretty well. Again, joining me today is James Marshall, who is our product owner of all of our data and analytic products. James, will you give us a little bit of your history and tell us something fun about yourself?
Sure, can do, Larry, and appreciate you keeping the hat on for us today. It's much better than the alternative, so thanks for that. No, thanks for introducing me. I joined Clear Capital about 5 years ago to really focus on how analytics can fuel the valuation market and our products internally and externally. Through that time, it's been a lot of fun working with you and the data science, data engineering, and software engineering teams to bring products to market. So I'm excited to dig into that a little more today. The challenges at my house are slightly different. Last weekend, John Stamos, if you know the guy John Stamos from Full House in the 90s, he alerted me that there might be a fire in my house. And so how this happened was my wife was screaming from the backyard as we were having a barbecue, James, John Stamos. And I was like, wait, what? I didn't quite hear the John Stamos. I thought our house was on fire while we were barbecuing. But what happened was she's in the healthcare industry, and the Beach Boys so graciously did a private Zoom concert for the healthcare professionals in our town. And that was a really good thing. And if you didn't know this, John Stamos is in the official Beach Boys band today. So that's how John Stamos and I are like this. And so that's my fun fact for the day.
Thanks, James. Something else interesting I noticed as we tuned in, I did tell James that I was going to be wearing a black shirt to match my black hat, and you'll notice he's wearing white. So I don't know if he's saying something about good versus evil, but I can say James is a good guy, and I do have I do have a secret evil side. So maybe this is appropriate. Hey, a couple housekeeping items for all of you. I know Zoom is so popular, you know, especially in a personal setting that a lot of you might be really familiar with it. We use it for webinars precisely because it is so easy for people. It's not a tool we use internally. You know, some of the problems with Zoom are pretty well known, but whenever we're doing a broadcast like webinar, making it easy for all of you to join this and help people that accidentally join it, that's fine with us too. They might learn something. But if you're new to Zoom, you'll notice down at the bottom you have a little toolbar, and we're going to be doing a Q&A session, and we have a couple other Clear Capital people behind the scenes, Ben and Lindsay and Matt, that are kind of orchestrating everything. And so if you have a question that you want us to cover, just click that Q&A button down there and type it in, and Ben and Lindsay and Matt they'll curate it and they'll try and populate it up to the top. Because as panelists, you know, we've got the mic. As people that are participating, you really can't speak up. So we'll use that Q&A to handle this. And then lastly, we are recording this webinar, and when it's all done, we'll probably do a little editing and clean it up and cut it down, but then expect that it'll be available within 24 hours. And we're going to, we'll send it out to everybody if you would like it. So with that, James, can we turn it over to you, and you can get us started.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks, Larry. So I'm sharing my screen now, and if you could you know, turn your attention to the slides. What we wanted to talk about today is among our spectrum of valuation products, we have an AVM, and our AVM is fairly young in the AVM marketplace, but we learned a lot over the last decade as we researched ways to produce AVMs and do them more accurately. So today we want to focus on how an AVM performs in an uncertain market. So let's dive right in. So the elephant in the room really that brings us together on this is the topic of COVID. So we want to not focus on COVID throughout the whole presentation, but we really want to look at COVID as it's impacting the real estate market. So ever since March, you know, we've been seeing a lot of headlines out there kind of speculating what the real estate market will do with the impact of COVID. So because of social distancing, we've seen a large amount of different, we've seen a lower amount of inventory or active listings on the market. We want to look at that a little deeper. So let's address some of those misconceptions and look at some of the data. So here's the facts. I mentioned there's a lot of chatter out there. There's a lot of noise going on, and everyone's trying to figure out what's going to happen in the future. So today we want to focus on the data. We want to focus on the current data that allows us to get our wits about us and make good decisions as we drive forward into the future. So one of those facts is listings are down. We've seen in some markets 20 to 40% of listings are reduced, but some other markets are relatively stable. And what that ultimately means is, how does it affect housing prices? So while we've seen lower amounts of homes being sold, the prices have actually remained fairly stable. So some of the chatter out there is not really aligning with the data. So that's where we're really going to focus is on this data over time to see what kind of impacts that has. Now, this doesn't mean that things cannot get crazy for us in the next year or so. So everyone, you know, comes to us asking what will happen the next year as far as the housing market. So let's look at the past a little bit. And Larry, you've been around in business during these times in the mid 2000s where things were a little interesting in the tech and real estate market. We've seen a dip in 2006 and and then recovery in 2008. But ever since then, we've seen about 10 years of stability. We haven't seen too much shakeup in the real estate market since then. So Larry, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, we've all been kind of speculating or hearing speculation that we're in potentially a bubble, but have you seen any noticeable noise as you and your tech team have been looking at this data?
Yeah, thanks, James. Yeah, funny thing, I guess we could call this another fun fact. I'm in technology because I just happen to be a computer geek, but my actual degree is in economics. So business has always been my first love. Yeah, that's the crazy thing about what we've seen here. You normally see, all healthy economies going through normal sort of expansion and contraction, but these 40 quarters of stability, just this onward and upward is very unprecedented, not only in our economy, but in the global economy. And so, in addition to COVID, this type of stability, there should be a natural, contraction anyways, but we haven't seen it. Again, it'll be interesting with COVID. But so far, James, what we're seeing in the data so far is reflecting the key points that you're making with the audience. So yeah, it's there's some interesting intersections that are going to probably occur in the next 12 to 24 months.
Yeah, thanks, Larry. So here's what we've been seeing that has been happening as directly related to COVID. And this is kind of where the projections are aligning more recently. Because more people have flexible jobs and they're working from home, they're starting to leave those densely populated urban areas to look for a little more room, a little more space, maybe a home office. So we're seeing some migration patterns happening. The housing needs are changing. People are having to, think differently with their family at home, and so their perception of what a suitable house is for their family changes. But really, the main aspect that's relating to our industry, or to real estate and valuation and banking, is how we look at valuing a property. So this has been a very human-centric practice over the last several decades. But now people are trying to figure out, how can I do this without having as much human interaction? And a lot of questions have been coming our way around AVMs. We set off to have an AVM that really wasn't to overtake appraisals. That's not our main job here. Our job is to have another tool in your tool belt to value a property. But if we're going to do that, we can't do it half-baked. We need to be able to do this very well and very accurately. So with people turning their attention to alternative valuations, they come to us and say, okay, I'm opening the conversation, and this is coming from a lot of risk groups at banks. I'm opening the conversation to AVMs and alternative valuations. How can I do that but not risk our portfolio, risk our stability, risk the economy? So with more reliance on data and analytics, they turn to us to help them understand how these things work, and more importantly, how they could be used in a volatile market. So that's where we're going to dig in a little bit deeper.
Hey, James, do you, we put the finishing touches on these slides a couple days ago, but you emailed me this morning a few other kind of cool stats. Do you care if I jump in and share those really quick with people?
Please do.
Cool. So, and again, guys, apologize that I'm reading it. It's just an email that James had sent me at 7 this morning, but a couple, other late breaking things. Pending home sales increased 16%, according to NAR's chief economist, Lawrence Yun. Quote, consumers are taking advantage of record low mortgage rates resulting from the Federal Reserve's maximum liquidity monetary policy. I won't do the economic explanation of that. Consumers are beating feet out of the cities. So just like we've shown you here, flight from urban areas. The Northeast reported a 54% increase in pending home sales from May to June, but sales are still just about flat year over year. And then from the chief economist at realtor.com, the demand is pushing home prices to record highs. When the pandemic helped to tip the US economy into recession, most homeowners and home buyers braced for falling house prices. That's what happened in the last recession. Again, a reminder, 2006, 2008. But that's not what we're seeing in today's market. We had a housing shortage already, and the pandemic has created conditions that have only worsened it. it kind of amazes me that people are comparing this recession to the last one, which was caused by a burst of the residential real estate bubble. These two aren't remotely comparable, at least as far as housing is concerned. And again, that's the chief economist over at realtor.com. So, you know, again, as of this morning, you know, it's helping us all, you know, better understand how this is different in all the ways that are obvious from things that we've seen in the past. Thanks, James.
Yeah, thanks, Larry. And Lawrence over at Realtor does a great job of keeping us in the loop almost daily on what's happening. And Realtor.com does a great job of this, but they also have a different goal, and their business is to, show that the housing market is a good investment. Clear Capital actually has a different fiduciary duty here. We have to make sure that we're valuing property realistically, so we don't make bad decisions on bad loan decisions. So we take their insights and we back them up by looking at our own data, and where the stars are actually aligning between the two mentalities on this. So Lawrence is spot on this. We can't treat this like the last recession, at least not yet, but we need to let the data do the talking. So with COVID, I wanted to spend some time on how that brings us into AVMs. An AVM, let's dig into what that is really quickly and how we're going to focus on that in this webinar. So an AVM, an automated valuation model, an algorithmic way to value a property. At its bare minimum, this could be a very simplistic computer program to do this task. But in our line of work, we need to make sure it's very rigorous, it's very cautious, but also extremely accurate. So in a scenario where there's volatile housing prices, or housing prices could be volatile in the near future, a legacy AVM is going to suffer. We know this from firsthand experience. We've tried several different ways of building AVMs in the past. We learned from the folks that have been doing this for decades, and we realized these antiquated methodologies just do not work. They do not work with the degree of accuracy that our marketplace needs. So some of those factors that go into these AVMs are limited data. Some of you might be aware, there's this thing called non-disclosure states out there. There's 12 to 14, depending on how you count the counties within them, where the sale price of a transaction, a real estate transaction, is not disclosed. So anyone building a model might need the actual sale price to train their model. If you can't do that in 12 to 14 states, you're going to be stuck. The other trouble with public records and recorded sale prices is that the data is just a little slow. So if you're predicting off of data that comes into your feed 2 months ago, like many county recorder offices do, and by the time that data hits the internet and into your system, you're predicting 2 months in the past. That's not going to do if market prices are changing week by week. The other factor is manual weighting of variables. So these are the variables that go into your prediction model. And if someone has to manually set how much a characteristic of a property is worth to value a property, whether this be a bedroom, bathroom, square footage, they're going to have some trouble, because every week the value of a square foot changes in a market. And if you have to manually set this in your algorithm, you're going to have some trouble keeping up with the changing market. And the last one is this outdated approach. So on top of both of those things, if your infrastructure and your code base behind your AVM is on slower systems and a little more challenged to predict on hundreds of millions of properties constantly, I've seen this happen where an AVM could take 30 days to predict the value of every home in the US. By the time you hit go and wrap up, your predictions are 30 days old. So that's a challenge for a modern AVM to overcome. So let's start with how to build a better AVM. What brought us here to discuss this is really not Clear Capital to talk about how accurate our AVM is, but why it's so accurate. We've covered the how and other presentations, other webinars, and really there's no better way than just getting your hands on these AVMs. So at the end, we will have a way for you to get your hands on AVMs and see this for yourself. But what I really want to do is open up the hood on our AVM engine and show you why this is possible. And that's why I have Larry, our CTO, joining us today, is that he's built the teams internally that can make this happen. So our main goal is really to just differentiate ourselves based on the most impactful aspect of an AVM, which is accuracy. So let's look at the foundational blocks that can make this become a reality. Number one, you need to be the expert. You could be an expert at many things, but right now we're going to focus on valuation. If you don't understand the art and science of putting a value on a property, your machine learning and your data is useless. So that's the first element and most important element. Number two is winning the data game. You got to think about your data strategy, your data pipeline, and how it all comes together to fuel a model. If you don't have that locked in place, you're going to be chasing your tail for years building a model to make up for it. So you got to start with the data. A little fun fact is we probably spent double the time working on our data pipeline versus the actual model. That's in real estate. Anyone, I'm sure most of the attendees on this webinar have been there. Real estate data is tough. It is fragmented. It is challenging. It is stale. There are gaps and inconsistencies. So you got to put a lot of focus on that. And then number three, machines just learn faster. There's a reason why machine learning is a buzzword around our industry. So we took that. We're a little quiet about our machine learning aspect because we don't want to overhype the technology. But here we're going to show you exactly how we are practitioners of it and put it to work to make this thing really work well. So number one is being the expert. I mentioned briefly that valuations are at the forefront of this. So if you look at the front here, Clear Capital has been doing valuations for a couple decades. Through that, we've learned the nuances, the challenges of putting a value on a property. Combining that with Larry's team, the data, the science, the engineering, has really been a recipe for success. So Larry, if you wouldn't mind, can you talk about how we kind of brought the two sides of the house together? You know, we're not just a pure technology company, we are a valuation services company. And I found there's kind of some beauty in bridging those two worlds.
Yeah, thanks, James. Yeah, there's a reason this diagram has valuations, you know, front and center with the biggest, you know, sort of character right there, because it really is the roots of you know, what Clear Capital did and what it was founded on. And although we've been a technology company almost since we were founded, we usually develop technology to sort of fuel our own internal workflow and efficiency. But you know, well before I joined Clear Capital, you know, in around 2006, 2007, the company started making real commitments to the data teams, you know, because it was just, you know, so obvious. We were starting to aggregate all this data. Although we might not have had a good product vision about what we wanted to do with it at that time, we were sensible enough to know that, hey, this stuff is going to be super valuable someday. And then ultimately, you know, so this, as we're accumulating this data, we know it's going to be valuable. We knew that we needed to start bringing science teams in to start to take a look at this and say, hey, what do we have here and what can be of value? And then we've really built a top-notch engineering team. It was solid when I got here, but we've really taken it to a new level, you know, bringing very much what I like to call a peninsula mindset with, you know, modern technology. We're an Amazon shop, so we tend to embrace a lot of the tools that come out of Amazon to help us do our job. But this combination of, again, this deep legacy of our valuation experience as a company, we have so many appraisers, we've done so many valuations. We get not only what it takes to do this process, but what a meaningful result looks like, and what, you know, what does that mean to our lenders? And combining all those together has given us a unique advantage. And we'll talk a little bit later about some of the things that we did that were different from other AVM providers. And I think that's coming up in a few slides. So I'll pause there. Did I cover that for you, James, the way you wanted?
You did, yeah, thanks. Yeah, that valuation expertise combined with our machine learning and data science group has really been powerful. And so the expertise doesn't only stop at data science. So when you think of data science, a lot of people focus on the statistics side of things. Where a lot of AVM practitioners have fell down in the past is that they haven't married that statistical approach with high scale compute. meaning the computer science side of machine learning is really important when you're trying to tackle a large problem such as valuing every property in the US accurately. There could be hundreds, there could be thousands of variables that go into these models, and there's hundreds of thousands of permutations across those variables to come up with the best answer. So allowing a statistical model to scale has been the missing link, and we seem to solve that with the teams that we have at our disposal, and I'm extremely proud of them for embracing those two things. Let's jump into data. I won't spend a ton of time here, but we all know data is fundamental, and more than just having good data is fast data. So for example, if you're going to build a model, hopefully you're building a model that's trained off of information that happened in the last 24 hours. If you're not doing that, you're missing a big opportunity to keep current with the market. So we'll explain through some charts and graphs in a little bit of how that actually comes together and produces a good product. So the machines. So this is where the machine learning comes in. I mentioned fast data, but what's really important with fast data is reacting to fast data appropriately. I mentioned manual weighting of variables in the past. So what this means is you calibrate your model by reassessing how much a bedroom is worth, how much a square foot is worth, and for any characteristic on a property. A machine really helps us out. They are like 100,000 many little interns trying to figure out what the right coefficients are for every characteristic on a property, on any property in the country. And you can't treat two properties the same throughout the country. I bring the example of Yellowstone versus Manhattan. I don't think you would value a property in either of those two geographies the same way. So the machine helps us out. It tries this high frequency random sampling to dynamically set the right coefficients on each variable for each property to figure out what the specific nuance is to every individual house, and then boil that back up to figure out the right path to get there. And it does this for every property in the country. And so that means no two properties are treated equally because they're all very different. And the US is a very dynamic and diverse landscape. So this is our secret sauce. This means every time we refresh this model, it does its own self-recalibration. And that's game changing. That's allowed us to have valuations that our customers come to us and say, how did you know that? How did you react to that? And so this is why we are talking today. We want to give some little peek behind the curtains there.
Hey, James, and let me jump in here because we talk about this a lot, and I get this question from people quite a bit. So I love how you said, machines are like 100,000 little interns running around. And hopefully a lot of you went, interns? What do interns know? They're not experts. Good, I'm glad you made that connection, because guess what? Machines aren't automatically smart either. As a matter of fact, they're quite dumb. They don't know anything. So they have to be trained up, and they're trained up by having a human in a loop that is an expert. That's why Clear Capital's valuation expertise going back 20 years is so important, because when we set these machines loose on this data, we have to have experts, these humans in the loop, that teach these machines, let's just call it the fundamentals of valuation, and what things matter, what things you can safely ignore, et cetera, et cetera. But that's where, once you get to that point, that's where the machines start to overtake the humans, and the importance of this slide, machines learn faster. The bottom line is this: if stupid people teach machines to be stupid, machines are just going to be stupid. But if smart people teach machines, how to come up with answers, then what machines start to do is they start to iterate and spot patterns and find their way sort of through the matrix way faster than a human being could. And, valuable insight starts to pop out the other side. Another common question, that we hear quite a bit, because there's so much, industry hype around, we get this all the time. Do you guys use artificial intelligence? And I find out that there's a lot of people that machine learning, artificial intelligence, what's the difference? And this is a oversimplification, but it does kind of, explain it clearly. Machine learning is the journey as you're training the machines. And if you get the model fit perfectly, and it's really starting to do its job, it actually starts to look quite intelligent. And so think about artificial intelligence as the end state. If you've done your job well and you've taught your machines well, the result that they're producing feels very intelligent, hence artificial intelligence. So, you know, crystallize that in your mind. Machine learning is the journey toward intelligence, and then the destination, if you've done it well, is what you can start to call AI. So that sound pretty clear, James? You think our audience could consume that?
It does, yeah. Thanks, Larry. Thanks for expanding on that.
Sure.
Pardon me. And one real quick, what I'm going to do is answer a question. And anyone on the webinar, go ahead and feel free to chat these onto the Q&A section in the toolbar there. But we got one from Benjamin here. So he asked us to comment on appraisal modernization, how that really fits into the AVM aspect. So how do AVMs integrate with the critical thinking performed by appraisers? I love this question because I'm actually taking a very different approach than a lot of AVM companies on this, and some people kind of find it surprising on why that I do take this approach. I'm actually, while I love this technology and I think our AVM is doing a very good job, I don't believe AVMs are the right tool for every property in the country. And I would not put my name on every single AVM we produce to be 100% certain that this is the value of the property. We have not seen AVMs overtake the accuracy of appraisers by even a close margin. But what we are doing is providing another tool in the valuation tool belt when the situation is appropriate. So if we determine that we have enough information on this property and similar comparables on a very nice, clean market, and AVM is the right tool for the job. We think there's plenty of other properties out there that we cannot provide a great AVM on, and a human in the loop needs to be there. So the AVM alongside the modernization of appraisals is really not to shove an AVM in an appraiser's face and say, you need to use this. It's to say, here's a different approach to value. You're the expert. What do you think about that? And to bring those two things together. So we're fairly young in bridging the worlds between AVM and appraisals, but we do think for the right tool for the right job. So I'm going to pause there on questions. Thank you for adding some more, and will there be plenty of time to answer these? I will not skip these, so thank you guys. Let's jump into the major innovations on building a better AVM. So we talked about some of the fundamentals behind the scenes and what it takes. Let's talk about what we've actually done. So when you think about finding a proper training set of data to value a property off of, really this has been inspired by the appraisal approach to valuation, which is if you don't have enough nice, clean, recent sales to compare your subject property to, you're going to have a hard time putting an accurate value on that property. The one thing that technology can do is, well, it may not know everything about the subject property that a human would when they're on the property, whether it be outbuildings or screened-in pools or condition, quality aspects. There are challenges there, but what it can do is consider thousands and thousands of possible comparables to pick from to zero in on a value. So finding new boundaries. Meaning we're not, a machine doesn't need to be constrained to an artificial boundary. A good example of this is in our headquarters hometown of Reno, Nevada. There's a zip code in the northwest side of town that is in economic competition with a zip code on the southeast side of town. And now these two are not right next to each other. There are homes though that compete with one another as people are making buying decisions. And so if your AVM can expand its horizons and say, okay, I don't see many sales in the Northwest to value this property, but I found a market that behaves very similarly, that's where we can expand our horizons and bring data together. I mentioned calibration. This is when a machine can react to different variables, different market conditions very quickly. And anytime you add new data to it, it can reweight those coefficients. We'll dive into that a little deeper. And then building a better factory. This means bringing it all together, building an infrastructure that allows us to compute very quickly. And with that, there's a lot of power. So I mentioned this boundaries aspect. So one term we use often is clustering. So a traditional boundary you might think of as a zip code or a county, these are fairly artificial. Why would we limit our bucket of potential comparables to a postal service delivery zone? It doesn't make sense. That's not how you want to value property. You want to find properties that are similar to one another, independent of where they sit. Sure, proximity is a very strong contributing factor to this, but you shouldn't limit yourself based on proximity. So we expanded our horizons on how we are looking at comparable properties, and that allows us to make up for some of the factors that that an AVM misses when a human's in the loop. This calibration. So I don't want to bore you with the details on this, but I do find this to be the most impactful aspect of our AVM. So this weekly recalibration means the distance to the subject, the pricing of properties, and maybe the conformity. This could be up to 200, 300 variables at any given time, but each one has a different weight as how it should be used to pick a comparable to draw a conclusion on valuing a property. And each of these things have static weights if you're going to do this one by one, but you need to tailor those weights by the property, by the market, and by the situation. So this recalibration allows us to dynamically do this by property for every property in the country in a very quick amount of time.
And when James says the word dynamically, that's code for machine learning.
Thanks, Larry. Yeah, I always forget to mention that word.
Not that we want to give away all of our secrets, but that is a very important place where we found that machine learning just far outpaces any other way of doing this. It is able to adjust, as James said, you know, there's up to 300 variables that are in play, and this is able to recalibrate and adjust very, very quickly and make recommendations, which we can then push through our models and regression and backtest and feel very confident about what it's adjusting the weighting to.
You know, Larry, as you're talking about this, I just realized I'm on the product team. I don't know why I'm talking about all this technology. You're the CTO. How about you jump in and talk about how all this stuff comes together? And you know, one thing that makes it possible is, yeah, sure, it's easy to put a machine learning model on one city at a time. If you're valuing Tallahassee, your model can work well for Tallahassee. How do you do that for every city in the country?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so this build a better factory, you know, I'm going to explain this in a little bit more detail, you know, and this is very much kind of, I'll call it like your typical worst to first, you know, type storyline. You know, it tracks very close to that. But again, you know, when I joined Clear Capital in 2016, you know, we had an AVM product. And I guess the best way to describe it is it was pretty, you know, it was pretty middle of the pack. You know, it wasn't underperforming or outperforming, you know, other AVMs. It was just kind of, you know, right there in there. But that's not what we wanted to do at Clear Capital. You know, we wanted to find a way that, you know, how can we do something that would be significantly different from how the industry has traditionally approached this problem, so that we can start to create something that, you know, not only can just, you know, move to the front of the peloton, so to speak, but that we were confident could remain there. And I think the best way to explain that is to draw some analogies between the way we approach that problem and the way Tesla has approached the problem of electric cars. The problem for Tesla with electric cars is not making electric cars. And if you've ever heard Elon Musk talk about Tesla, he never says that the cars are the product. What he does say is the product is the gigafactory, these factories where they make these electric cars. And the reason that that's the product is Elon Musk knew that it wasn't likely that electric cars could be produced at a volume level that automobile manufacturers typically need to survive, which is, you know, somewhere on the magnitude of at least 2 to 2.5 million automobiles. And he knew he'd be producing at a much lower level. So if he couldn't build a production process that would allow him to survive at 400,000 or 500,000 units a year, Tesla would be solving the wrong problem. He was confident that they could produce cars that people would want, but could they produce them at a level and at a price that would make them workable? So he said, we have to build a better factory. And that was what, when I arrived at Clear Capital and I saw where we were at, I knew that we could keep iterating, but we would probably just keep iterating at the same pace and speed as everybody else. And we would never really break out. And, for many of you on this call, because our company's been around for 20 years and a lot of you are probably familiar with our CEO. Boy, if Dwayne can't be the best at what we do, his opinion is that we're not giving our customers all the value that they're paying for. And we don't want to see people spend their money or their professional reputations with Clear Capital and our products if there's other better products out there. So Dwayne was super committed to how do we pull to the front? And so I approached this problem as, well, we have to build a better factory because we can't iterate our models at the same speed as other people. We need to be able to do this in a way that is so fast that our scientists can learn at 10 to 100 times the speed of other teams. And then, of course, if we start to insert machine learning into the loop and we train it with our valuation experts, boy, we have something. So what we knew that this better factory needed to be able to do is it needed to be able to produce AVM values quickly. And so we set about building the better tooling first. And when we were all done, that allowed us to do some really powerful things. Number one, it would allow us to regenerate a national model with 140 million homes in under 4 hours. So we could see national results really quickly. And then the second thing that it allowed us to do.
Actually, I don't know if, as CTO, I thought you'd be closer to this, but we've actually got it down to 2 hours now. So I should update you.
There you go. So no, James, I trust you and your teams, to continue to optimize. All right, so I stand corrected. Our better factory can now generate 140 million AVM valuations in under 2 hours. So that's pretty neat. When we get ready to actually, that means that this AVM can keep pace with the market because our data is so fresh within a couple hours if we wanted it to. Now there are all sorts of practical reasons why you don't need to do that, but that we are, I'll just say, carrying that very big gun in our holster is pretty neat. Here's where it really gets important is as we're training our models or we think of ways to improve this AVM that we think will be beneficial, in order to test those out, if you had to go slow, it would just take forever because you might need to go through 50, 80, 100 iterations. And so what this factory allows us to do is our data science team has key MSAs that they've pulled, somewhere between 30 and 40 of them, that are extremely strong predictors of what our results are going to be as we're working with our models and working with our data. And so they can put that in play, hit the build button on generating, probably 20 million values for these 36 MSAs. I was going to tell you in under 15 minutes, but now with our overall optimization, that's probably running sub 10 minutes. So you can imagine how much iteration we can do in a typical workday to keep these models current, to constantly learn. That would cause other providers, they might take weeks or even months to be able to do that. So this is super important. It's just like Tesla, if we didn't have a better factory, we wouldn't be able to build this better AVM. So James, how does that sound? Does that cover it off where people kind of understand why that's so important?
It does. Yeah. Thanks, Larry. What I want to do is, respect the time of our audience. We could talk at you all day about the power of machine learning, but the proof is in the pudding. So I want to get to some technical analysis of what actually shows how our AVM keeps up with the volatile market. So let's look at volatile markets. First, you got to identify a volatile market. As we talked about in the first couple of slides, the challenge has been the last 10 years have been pretty easy on AVMs. It hasn't been much of a stress test. So we've had it pretty good. We can talk about accuracy, but let's try to figure out how to stress test these AVMs because something could be coming And if a bank or a lender is going to start using tools like this, we want to make sure they're good. So you got to keep up with this volatility. These stable markets are not really helping us. So anybody can drive in a straight line. 40 quarters of stability has really made it easy on us. There's sure rising prices ahead. It's a straight road. The challenge is, can you handle the curves? When the curves are thrown at you or your machine or your analytics, how do you deal with demand evaporation, stagnant sales, price volatility, listing volume decreasing? How does this affect an AVM? So that's what we set out to research and demonstrate today. All right, so this is where I'm going to jump into a little more technical analysis. Stay with me, but trust me, this is the main question we've been getting lately is how does your AVM compare to the actual market, and how long does it take to react to a change in the market? So let's drill into that. Let's start nationally. This is just an overall trend of the year 2000 to the year 2020 with median sale prices. A very basic look at that. So median sale price is not an index, it's just a very quick measure of what is the middle of the road of sale prices for any given period. This is by month. So by month for the last 20 years. So you'll see the general arch here, and I'm gonna have to get my pointer out to make sure I can show this stuff. But if you look at here, we see the rise in home prices and then the fall of home prices in the mid 2000s. Then after that point, it goes up. So that's the last 10 years, but let's look at, let's dissect this. Let's focus on a region and a time and look closer to see how an AVM reacts. Oh, let me get rid of the pointer there. Okay, so this is when we first want to look at the national market versus ClearAVM. So the national market, as I laid out in the previous slide, is the sale price, median sale price on the black line. So let's look at 2018 through today. Median sale price versus median AVM for the whole nation. Our median error across this is about 1 to 2%. It's pretty tight. It tracks pretty close. You know, you see the yellow line, our AVM, deviate from the national median sale price every now and then. But it tries to course correct and learn from itself to figure out where it should be. Sometimes, other times it's spot on. When it is, the gap between the AVM and the sale price is between 1 and 2%. It's not huge, but that's all well and good at national level. It's abstracting the problem here. So what I want to do is pick a few key markets where we've seen volatility in the last, I don't know, a year or so. Try to look at COVID to see where COVID was creating volatility and see how our AVM reacts in those scenarios. Now, these are markets we really identified not because we do well there on our AVM. In fact, we don't do as well as we'd like, but they are volatile, and that shows how fast our AVM can react to change. All right, so let's look at San Francisco. This is the MSA level. Not only is it the MSA, we want to figure out what's happening on a weekly basis. So we're measuring median sale prices. Again, that's the black line, and we're plotting these median sales for this whole MSA over time, week by week. Now, our AVM is also plotted here, our median AVM value. And so our goal is this yellow line, we really want that to be exactly overlapped with that black line. Now, it doesn't always do that, and that's our error rate. That's natural for an AVM. It's going to have error. But the question an AVM needs to answer is how fast do you correct that error? So here's what I want to start pointing out. And if you focus on any one of these black dots, let me use my pointer again and see if we can do that. I'll use the spotlight pointer here. Okay, so if you look at any given point in time, let's use this black dot here. So the gap between the yellow and black dot is our error. Now, we were off that week, off by a little bit. It wasn't huge, but what the AVM needs to do is recognize, okay, we were off, and how do you adapt to that? So if you look at the week after that, that yellow dot is very close. So if you pick any point on this line, a spike, a dip, and then look at the current week compared to the week after, that's what we're trying to answer. How fast does an AVM react to volatility? So we see this chart going up and down quite a bit. But this is on the scale is a little different here. It's not that big of a spread, but we want to zoom in on it to show, all right, how does this actually track? So the main takeaway is in San Francisco, our median error is a little higher than we'd like, but we react to that very quickly, meaning our recalibration, our fresh data flowing in here, and our understanding of how to produce value and how to weight a variable allows us to get in check with the actual market within 1 to 1.5 weeks. Now, if you're using old data, you're using old infrastructure, at minimum, it's going to take a month for you to get back to where you need to be. So this is where our machine learning and our data flows really come into play. Now, I don't want to just leave you with San Francisco. I want to dig in a little bit to some other areas. Let's look at Pittsburgh. So we were on the West Coast. Let's go a little further east. So this is another market where you're seeing volatility. Really, I don't want the takeaway to be that you have to focus on what's happening in Pittsburgh, what are median sale prices. The point is, Pittsburgh is interesting because it had volatility. Now, seasonality is the main thing at play here. While we've seen large growth over time nationally, you might remember the dips in ebbs and flows in these median sale prices over time. That's seasonality. That happens year over year. And that's actually a great way for us to look at quote unquote volatility, because it's change in the market. And if your market is changing constantly, you need to be able to react to that. So same situation here. We see spikes and dips throughout Pittsburgh, and week over week. Now our AVM sometimes off, but it needs to react. It's off, needs to react. So that time in between reaction is very minimal. One quick last market that I want to focus on is Oxnard, California. This one's interesting because it's very spiky, but overall stable if you zoom out. That means sometimes we miss it, sometimes we don't. But overall, the median error is pretty strong here. So that means a less volatile market is going to have less error. That's a good place to be. Most markets are in that state right now. So what we want to do in this presentation is show you that a volatile market is more challenging for an AVM. However, if you have the right tools in place, you can react to that challenge. So we got quite a few questions here. So what I want to do is kind of wrap up with, if you can't keep up with sale prices, you're going to struggle to find traction in this marketplace and provide value to your clients that are dependent on you. Whether you're using AVMs in quality assurance on evaluation, or you're using it in secondary markets, you need to be sure that this thing can react to change. So the racing analogy is strong here, where if you can't keep up, don't enter the race. And so, as Larry said, our CEO is strong on this. We're not going to be in the AVM marketplace unless we're absolutely doing our best at it. So that's where our sights are set, and our next task is to continue being transparent with where AVM struggle and where we're improving. But our commitment to you is that we're going to end up on top. So Larry, I've been kind of hogging the mic for a while. Do you have anything to add to this before we go into the Q&A section?
No, I think you covered it great, and for everyone that's paying attention, you can sort of see a bit of the setup early on, where we talked about those 40, straight quarters of growth, which, I don't want to say that's made us complacent, over the last 10 years, us as an industry, because you can sort of always count on, hey, this is what it's going to look like, but we do, we are now entering a time where it's just fair to say that the road, and obviously the title of the session is volatility, but it's just going to get a little more windy. And again, hopefully you're understanding through, that we have this fast, fresh data from the MLSs, that is coming into us every 4 hours, and we're ETLing it, ingesting it, every 24 hours to make sure it's really pristine. ETL is extract, transform, and load. It's a term for how you make sure that the data that enters into your system is as pristine as possible, because those MLS boards are not always perfect. The fast factory, that we've built that allows us to regenerate quickly. The analogy of keeping, our AVM close to the sales dot on straight roads and curves is, it really is a fast follow. Think of it this way: we need to be right in the rear view mirror of sales, filling it up, so closely behind it, so that as you're relying on your AVM or relying on Clear Capital's AVM, that you know that this is reflecting the market as it's playing out, you know, almost in real time. So super, super important. And with that, we can transition to, I've tried to answer some of the questions privately to some of you out there, and then we've left some open. So James, you want to start going down the list, and you and I can talk to either one of these, and hopefully we leave everyone covered.
Yeah, that'd be great. We got quite a few questions, so I apologize if we don't get to all of you live today. I'll try to hit the list as they came in, and if we don't get it live, we'll follow up with you via email. We want to make sure we give you all the details that you're looking for. So one from Ciro is, what are the main metrics you use to evaluate and improve the model? So this really comes from our nightly testing mechanism. While there are quarterly tests out there from third parties that we perform very well on, our internal nightly metrics are to make sure we're keeping up with the market. And these happen to be around error rates across geographies, across property types. And so a common phrase for that is, how often are you within 10% of the actual benchmark or actual sale price appraised value? So PPE 10 is the term for that, or a mean absolute error. Those are the two main ones we focus on. But you need to balance that with hit rate as well to figure out where you could be predicting better, and if we need to be predicting on more houses in any certain geography, like West Virginia or the Midwest. So we actually, our team might follow up with you, Ciro, to point you to our glossary of terms on our blog of how we define and measure. So this actually is very close to what Angelo has asked, which is our error metrics. To use MAE, root mean squared error, what else? Absolutely, we have about 10 to 15 that we monitor constantly. So nightly, we have alerts when these things deviate from norm. Bridget asked, can you talk about what properties the AVM does not work on and how you identify those with low confidence scores? Absolutely, this is where we focus most of our time, edge cases within the nation on how to solve for those. We found, I'll talk about where our AVM does work well. And that is where you might imagine, where we have lots of sample size, lots of training data. That's on the typical conforming side of loans, you know, in the mid-range of housing prices, around the median price of homes across the US. The low dollar properties, the very high dollar properties, that's where AVMs struggle because there's not as many comps out there. So that's where we are trying to figure out other ways of approaching that problem. And that's where we've just invented some of our different ways of approaching this valuation problem with custom boundaries.
Hey, James, can I jump in really quick? Because in a couple of your answers here, you sort of said, you've mentioned nightly testing a couple times. And so that might kick off some questions for people. So as James said, you know, we submit this AVM to rigorous third-party testing. But as I told you, you know, we built this better factory and we can iterate quickly. And so when our data science team is, again, you know, they'll usually go after these main MSAs as sort of the bellwether for how this is looking. And when they're seeing positive traction, they're running a bunch of, you know, localized tests, and they're like, hey, this looks pretty good. Let's promote this up. And let's subject it to our nightly testing suite, which is this very aggressive sort of regression back testing to see whether or not this thing holds water. And then, you know, a little bit more. So where does the machine learning come back into play? As we promote this up for nightly testing and we see the results, those results feed back into the machine learning to say, whoa, is this getting what we want? So we have this very powerful feedback loop. And this testing and validation, whether it's localized or this nightly testing that we do, just allows us to move forward daily with confidence on, you know, are we pushing this thing, you know, higher and higher and making it better and better, or are we doing things that aren't making a material impact? So again, you know, all part of that better factory, better process that we've created.
Perfect. Thanks, Larry. I think that is all the time we have for questions, so I'll let you wrap it up real quick.
Sure, James. It's an hour webinar, and often as you're trying to explain this, you do create a lot of curiosity and natural questions. Boy, are we sure happy to talk to you and tell you how we do things, why they make a difference, and as James always likes to say, and he'll probably conclude after me. Boy, we really welcome you to take it for a test drive. And for those of you that are from organizations that, can pay to access third-party testing, those third-party testers are a valuable part of everything that we do. And I'll just say we would not be displeased if you were to pay for and look at that third-party result. It will really put some meat behind everything that we're talking about. And with that, I'll give it to you, James, for the final wrap up.
Thanks, Larry. Yeah, thank you all for your questions. Like I said, we will be in touch with you we've got to barely half of them. So I appreciate those. Feel free to contact us at sales@clearcapital.com for any more questions you might have, and to go ahead and try this thing out. So we appreciate you attending today, and we'll be here for you with any other technical questions you might have. So thanks for joining, everyone.
Appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.